Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and production. Any questions that you have around those things. Second hour is something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about the Flow8, the Behringer Flow8. A lot more people are using it. So we're going to talk about what is it and how it works and answer your questions around the Flow8. Tomorrow, we're going to talk doing the ruthless reviews. So that is the ruthless video reviews. So we're going to pick at everybody's setups. So it's usually a fun one to watch. Thursday, we're going to be talking, Thursday, we'll be talking about breaking into the industry. A lot of people like, how do I actually get started? How do I get the first job? So we'll talk a little bit about how we did that and answer your questions around that process. Now, Friday, we are going to talk about Isadora in the second hour. Now, we've had a lot of after-hours discussions, and you've seen Isadora show up. And we had Mark on to talk about it and kind of give us an official overview, but this is going to be us talking more about how we're using it. It's pretty cool application, so we're going to talk about that on Friday. And then, of course, Saturday is the education hour, which we don't stream, and also the Belfast method, which will be at noon. It'll have its own link, and you will be able to watch us put together a TV show, a concert, in Belfast, but from all over the world. So it's pretty exciting. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon and evening, depending on where you are. Rick Timkovich starts this morning from Wellington, Colorado, and he asks, what's the preferred way for a newbie to get a first-time mic and video check with some gentle feedback from the panel? After hours, would that be the best way?
Chris?
I'm not going to promise completely, John. No. Yeah, after hours is definitely the place to do it. A lot of people have dropped in and said, hey, what do you think of my lights? We were talking with a gentleman, Kyle Holiday, yesterday, giving him some advice on how to set up his camera in his very small space. It's a great place to just come in, pop in, raise your little digital hand, kind of play by the rules. And that's one place we actually use the digital hands. And somebody will call on you and just say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, and can somebody tell me how I sound and what I can do to make it sound better? It's a great way to find out.
I am finding a huge reservoir of knowledge. Just a lot of people, a lot of smart people who are particular.
Possibly more than you wanted to hear.
Well, it's just like I came in, I was like, every once in a while I test it with some curveball. Like I'm looking for a, power washer. Like I am looking for a power washer. And we got into like a 20-minute discussion about power washers. And there were some people who knew a lot about power washers, just in case you're wondering. We don't do that very often, but I always wonder, like, it's now like my reservoir of just smart people, like smart people that I think that I can go ask something that's relatively geeky. I usually find that the conversation is useful, but yeah, it's great to listen to as well. Even if you don't have a question, I will say that just a lot of people that are nugging through problems, they're talking about how something looks or some issue with their network or some issue with their editing package or something. And people are just figuring it out. And I find it like to be really great slow radio. I love just listening to it for hours while I'm working. If I'm not doing something where I have to be in meetings, I have meetings a lot, but when I'm not, I love just sitting in there and just listening to the conversation. So it's definitely worth checking out. It's kind of the secret of office hours. Anyway, next question.
Comes to us from Mike Emmett, and Mike is in Melbourne, Australia, and he says there seems to be more demand in small to medium-sized companies for simple but high-quality production of their Zoom meetings. Do you see this trend continuing?
Go ahead, Chris.
Possibly and hopefully. I think that there's, supply and demand. There's plenty of supply. I think there's a lot of people like us that have the know-how and are willing to help be paid to do this. I think that when people realize that a good conversation is aided by just a little bit of technical help. I've been working with this one woman for the last couple of weeks, and I can't get her to get an Ethernet cable. And she's like, I'm having issues. It might be my connection. I said to her the other day, I said, it's absolutely your connection. It's 100%. Just go get a cable. Yeah, okay. She won't. When people decide to step up a little, it'll get better.
Good though.
I do that for a couple of the companies, and it's one of my least favorite things, not because they're not wonderful companies and I like working with them, but just because the amount of can be charged for an hour-long Zoom meeting that is boring to try to make it less boring. Because I hate to say it, but everybody hates meetings in corporations, and it's because they tend to be really long-winded and they don't get to the point. So if you're doing a good job for them and try to make it more watchable, I've spent 3 or 4 hours on a 1-hour meeting just to basically get something out the door that isn't horrible. So in order to charge for that reasonably, the market has to be able to bear it. And I would think medium-sized companies are a better shot than the small ones, because the small ones usually don't have a budget for that. So it's going to be tough work. If you're just starting out and you want something to get a lot of practice, boy, you can get it in that. The other thing is also they will be on Zoom, and then the company will move to Teams, and you'll have to learn a new system. So just be aware of that. That's
Good
all.
guy.
Yeah, I think that smaller companies, especially those that would have had a booth at like an NAB, as soon as they figure out that they're not traveling somewhere, they got to find a way to get their message out there. This morning, Stuart told me to go watch a KiloView webinar, and I tuned in and I was watching the tail end of it. And then they did a giveaway, and it was kind of shocking to see how many people were sitting there in chat, because chat just lit up. You had to copy it, or you had to type in a key phrase, and probably 200 people typed that key phrase in there at the last, 20 seconds, and it was like, and it just lit up, and I was like, wow, these guys got something. So, build a list, get a good run of show. We use Google Sheets, use Unity Comms. There's just a few little things that make shows better, but know what you're going to talk about. And if you can, request 720p or 1080 for your event, so it actually looks good, and then come in here and learn from folks.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yes, I typed in the key phrase. No, I didn't even see mine fly past. There was that many people. It wasn't funny. The other thing is, Mike, I suck at marketing, but if you win at marketing, I'm available to switch streams. But we're finding, myself and a few others who are trying to get this sort of stuff to happen, is that a lot of businesses in Australia are just not giving a damn about their appearance on camera. They're hey, this is clean for Australia.
Not for us though. So,
but my point being that they're just not putting in the effort. They're just not caring about looking as professional as they could be. Local councils, local governments, local businesses, and what have you, as long as there's an image there, they're happy, and they're doing it on phones that are ancient with poor lighting, poor sound, really poor sound. Even the news is really poor sound when they're doing these things. So we're kind of beating our heads against the wall, but we're chatting in Discord. So Mike, yeah, I'm happy to pitch in with that.
I think that one of the things that we can continue to do on our own is to just keep upping our game. I think that people, when they see a couple of us show up that have good setups and are well lit and have good audio, a lot of times they think that, wow, I could be doing better. Like I could actually, maybe I should be, playing a higher game. I think that for companies and for, whether it's companies or politicians or people who are marketing, they just forget how much, they think about how to dress and how to set something up and how all of those things matter, but they just haven't thought about their video appearance as it relates to their appearance of authority, an appearance of knowledge. And people we love to say that it shouldn't matter, but it does. It does matter, and people listen to you a different way when you come in all, with a bad connection that you can barely hear, and it's breaking up, and you can't understand what you're saying, and everything else. People make a decision about it. It's not a conscious decision. That's what makes it so dangerous. Is they're subconsciously deciding that you're less than. And it's not even like a thing like they're thinking about it. It's not even a thought that goes through their head. They're just not taking you as seriously, as they would if you had good content. And so it is a progression for companies. A small company, the great thing about video is that a small company can look like a big company without having to have a big headquarters. You can look like a lot of company without having the infrastructure that a big company would normally have. And all you got to do is have a good set of videos, good set of cameras and mics, and you can look a lot bigger than you are. And that's what a lot of small, medium-sized companies are missing. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I've asked the people that represent our company, like especially in record sessions, I've always told them, I go, look, want you to look better and sound better than anybody else we're recording. And we have a new guy as a contractor who's doing a bunch of recording for it. I sent him a MV7 over the weekend, and I said, here, I want you to use this. And he's like, all nestled up to it, and it sounds so much better. I was like, see, that wasn't that easy. And he goes, well, yeah, but you paid for it. I said, well, it wasn't that expensive.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and our reputation is starting to precede us. We connected with our event last Friday, and to a team in a production company in St. Louis, they started looking at the email thread and they went, oh, that's the office hours guys. So it's happening, Stuart.
I think probably once a week I get into some meeting and they go, oh, I'm really glad we're working with you. Like, because they just see the webcam. They just go, you must know what you're doing. So for us, I think we have to play pretty hard, to have people expect. Like, again, if you're playing at 150%, they'll play at 70% instead of you playing at 80% and then playing at 10. So you just have to keep pulling that notch up. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Aaron Huslidge, and that just moved, so let me do that. I'm searching for a cloud-based system to store loads of footage and retrieve it by tag or description search. Can the panel recommend any such system?
Anybody have any ideas? There are database systems, and I just haven't used them very much. Go ahead, Chris.
It's the same thing. I was going to say same thing. I know that there's something. I'll look into it, Aaron, and contact you in after hours. I know that there's something. I know that Frame is good for uploading and downloading huge amounts of stuff, but you can't really tag it. You can't search it like that. And I think ultimately Frame.io doesn't really want to be that company either. That might change, but I'll look into it. I know that there's something that does a tagging and metadata sort of thing.
Yeah, I think one that you may want to check out that we looked at years ago and we just haven't had as much time is called A-Frame, aframe.com. I know it's complicated that there's a frame.io and then an A-Frame, but the letter A. aframe.com is, I think, actually built for a lot of this, where you put a lot of this is for building workflows in the cloud. And they actually, when we worked with them, they were setting up ingest sites. Like, hey, if people can come to your place and just push up a bunch of ProRes or push up a bunch of other bits and pieces. So anyway, aframe.com is probably the only one that I can think of to take a look at. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, has our next question. He says, what security camera system do you recommend?
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I was in the surveillance business, and I put Nest in my house, and that was a mistake. These are the top of the line. The reason why I like these so much is because they have onboard storage. They're fully extensible. They have an onboard web server. You can telnet into them. You can FTP to them. There's a ton of community built around these cameras, and so you'll never outgrow these cameras, but you will outgrow the Nest cameras or any of the commercial grade or the consumer grade stuff. So I'm a huge proponent of the Access cameras.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm actually a fan of the Hikvision and Dahua branded stuff, which is available as multiple different brands, the rebranded OEM with no branded, whatever. I should point out Dahua and Hikvision are actually owned by brothers, and the factories are on the opposite sides of the street in Ugia, I think it is the area of China, with one brother producing all the PVR stuff and one brother producing the cameras, and then they swap the hardware across. But something for what John just said with the media being in the camera and being able to record. John, what format does it record in? Because one of the issues with a lot of the security cameras is they record in their own format instead of just an MPEG-4.
No, MPEG,
So
you can choose
those ones.
You can choose the format, MPEG-4, H.264, H.265. They also stream out directly out of the camera.
Good.
Well, that'd be a better choice than the Hikvisions.
Good, Courtney.
If you're on a budget, Wise has a pretty good selection of remotely controllable cameras that are quite cheap. They record in the camera. They have web servers built into them. And they do charge for monitoring now. So they used to not charge for monitoring, but it's a fairly low fee for them to monitor and notify you upon motion detection. So,
go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind.
Next question.
Moving on to Nick Batts. Nick Batts in the UK says, any suggestions for building YouTube chapters on the fly, writing cue points to log files, or exporting them, exporting from NLEs? Any method tips welcome.
Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, an EDL, an edit decision list, is what you want. So most, well, actually all NLEs can do them. XML is the best because it's human readable. So if you're using Premiere Pro, you want to export as Final Cut Pro XML. It'll give you an XML file that can be read in Final Cut Pro, but you're just more interested in the actual file and the data in there. If you use markers, so if you put a marker in there as well where you want your chapters, because the EDL will actually have every cut, of course, but if you put a marker in there, you can actually just do a quick word search in the EDL itself and just look for those markers, and then you can delete the rest and then copy and paste that into your description. In Final Cut Pro, it's a little bit easier because it just exports it XML as well with the markers.
Interesting. Very good. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California says, do you have any reference to any small studios or sound stages in San Diego?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't have any offhand, but you might check LA411.com. That covers the Los Angeles area and generally Southern California, and they have categories for small stages and so on. And a lot of companies that own and operate small stages in the Los Angeles areas might have some satellite stages in the San Diego area.
If only we knew somebody who lived in San Diego. Bill?
Which is why I got confused last time, because I was trying to look up the names of them. I've only been in San Diego for about 3.5 years, so I don't know the people as well as I should. There are 5 or 6 nice kind of pocket insert type studios in San Diego, and there's a couple of that are bigger. So it depends on the scale of production, but if you want to DM me offline, I will be happy to try to help you find the ones that the people here respect the most. There are quite a few.
All right, next question.
Next question comes from Michael in Silverado, California. And Michael says, getting ready to purchase the first ATEM. Which model should I start with? Do we expect Blackmagic Design to offer new models soon?
Go ahead, Noah.
What's really cool about Blackmagic is they are really good about their tier system, about releasing products at different levels. So the way I would go about choosing a model is, first, do you need HDMI primarily or SDI? And then look at their full lineup, kind of evaluate what your scale is, what your scope is. And just like with all products, the higher up you go on that scale, the better, the more features they're going to offer. The other choice you got to make is, do you want a rack mount unit, which means you probably need a separate controller, whether that's a Streamdeck or one of the ATEM 1ME controllers, or do you want it as an all-in-one unit?
Go ahead, John.
So Noah killed it. Noah has a 20-minute video on YouTube on switchers. It's amazing. I suggest you go look at it. I'm going to give you my personal experience. I bought the ATEM Mini Pro ISO, quickly outgrew the 4 inputs, and then immediately went up to the extreme. And I'm pretty happy right in that level.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, working backwards from your need. And again, we bought the original one for our church and it worked great, but it does not have the breakout. So I don't see the monitoring of the different cameras. That would be kind of critical. And that's what I was able to buy because the evolution of a thing happened 1.5 years ago. So I do have that second one, but I've used the ISO with the multiple inputs and the multiple functionalities. And for the price point, that used to be a $30,000 piece of kit. And so now you can get it for $1,200, and it isolates your recordings, and then you can it's all time sunk together on a little card. It's kind of magical. So yeah, buy once, cry once if you're in the middle, but you could go up to 30,000 depending on your need.
Go ahead, Noah.
One thing I forgot to mention, obviously NAB is coming up in a month, and a lot of us have been anticipating an upgrade to the 2ME and that kind of mid price point there. So if you're waiting on that or you're looking at that, you might hold off at least another month.
Yeah, I think that there are reasons that if you think that you're really only going to use it as a desktop and you want something that's got a small form factor and it's relatively inexpensive, I think for Zoom calls that are like Zoom Plus, that you're just adding some value to it, I think that the little mini is just fine. I think that if I was gonna, as soon as I decided I wanted to go to Pro, I'd immediately go to Extreme. If you're gonna go, so if you want a little thing, because if I'm traveling, I actually take the mini with me. But if you want the mini and you're traveling, that's the one you want to travel with, and that's great, and it does a very basic job. As soon as you want any more, don't get anything in between. Just go all the way to the Extreme ISO, and that's your next step up. And then after that, you're talking about SDI, and my only recent experience has been with the constellations. So I wouldn't buy anything in between those right now, because almost all of them are waiting to be revved. And so that's where I would be very careful. So if you're not ready to spend the kind of money that you need for a constellation, I would wait on any SDI switcher for at least a month. Next question.
Next one in first hour is actually about the Flow8. So I wonder if you think, Alex, we should push that over to
Go ahead and we'll go ahead and answer it here.
Okay, fair enough. So it's real simple. Michael in Silverado, California, wants to know Flow8 versus MixPre.
Go ahead, Carl.
So there is a little bit of a difference. The Flow8 doesn't record, the MixPre does. The Flow8 is less than the price of Noise Assist, and Noise Assist is one of the good things about the MixPre. But really, the MixPre 6 would be like the equivalent as far as features in a way, as far as inputs and that kind of stuff. So you're looking at around $1,000 US plus $300 for Noise Assist for the MixPre 6 plus Noise Assist, and you're looking at under $300 for the Flow8. So that's where they really are in different markets. So a little bit hard to compare. For office hours, I would probably say the Flow8. If you're using office hours and your professional work, maybe MixPre.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, for this situation, for office hours or for any streaming, Carl covered most of the similarities. The MixPre is really also a production recording machine, so it has time code, it has recording, it has 32-bit float. I think the Flow8 does too, but it does recording in 32-bit float. So if you're going to be using it in production at all with video or film, God forbid it, it would be the better choice.
Go ahead, George.
And it's also made by, the MixPre is made by Sound Devices, and the other one's not.
There's that. No, it's true. Yeah, I think that I think the Flow8 is the reason we're spending a second hour on it is I think it's an amazing piece of gear, that that Behringer has really found a way to plug a lot of it in. For me, I couldn't use it because I have too much noise. So I'm using a fairly aggressive noise assist here because I've just got lots of little fans and things and family and other things. And so for me, it's been I couldn't use something without noise assist, but I think that if I had a better treated room, I might be tempted to use the Flow8. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Noah Sargent, and Noah asks, how do you balance getting work done and listening to office hours? Do you?
Go ahead, Stuart.
A little poorly, I suppose, for most of us. I've been joining in after hours basically when it's dinner time here, because it's like, come in and have dinner with your mates sort of thing. It's a bit of socializing, bit of chatting, listening to the conversations, and that's the easy way for me to balance it. But everybody's technique will differ according to what suits them.
I do find that the way I do it a lot of times, and I think other people do it the same way, is that I very consciously turn my mic and my camera off when I'm just playing it in the background like radio, but I'm still listening. It's still like floating around as if NPR was playing and I'm kind of listening to it. But for me, it turns it off for me. It's like I don't feel like I have to be active in that area. And then when I feel like Stuart, I'm having lunch or I'm having a coffee or, I need a break. I just need a break for a minute. I just need to just hang out for a second. I'll turn my camera on and just hang out with everybody for 15 or 20 minutes and talk to everybody and then turn it off again and go back to what I was doing. So I feel like that's become my little, and I never expected to get into that pattern.
It's your water cooler, Alex.
It is. It's like the water cooler. It totally is. It's a global water cooler. That's what After Hours is. Global geeky water cooler. And it totally is, except that I really like hanging out with everybody in the water cooler as opposed to most water coolers, which I wouldn't ever hang out with because I usually didn't want to talk about the last TV show, that I didn't care about. And so anyway, yeah, it's a great water cooler to just take a break. And I come in at different times just because that's the break that I have. The other day, my daughter brought friends over, and I'm not the most social person, so it was a great place for me just to hang out with everyone while the storm was going on outside in the rest of the house. So anyway, that's kind of how I use it anyway. Next question.
Comes from Danny Law in Malaysia. Danny says, much has been said about staying away from virtual backgrounds in video conferencing. What if it's done correctly to the point that the rest can't tell if it's virtual or real?
Go ahead, Noah.
That's typically something we try to do as professionals, right, in person or what have you, when we set up gear and support for those kind of things. Obviously, that comes at a cost. And so specifically around green screens, it has to be very evenly lit. And so you're talking about a minimum of probably 4 lights. And so it's definitely something that can be done. But it's very challenging. Obviously, with the office hours team, we have a higher standard of what we expect because we see it and work with it all the time. So to do it right, generally basically means you're going to do it at a higher cost.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I think too, most of the ways, because it's been made so accessible, so pedestrian, people are just kind of abusing it, they're not really caring about it. And so what happens is you have that differential key that tears and it causes agitation. I think in taste, like in order to cut yourself out from the background and not something that's you're going to be presenting with all the time, I think it can be used in that instance without distracting people. But yeah, I think the big problem is that most of the people who are using it aren't thinking about it. They're just thinking, I'm poorly lit, but I'll just throw on the virtual background and this will fix it.
Are you keying? Are you keying a virtual background in there? Did you just show off the fact that you're keying a virtual background? It looks really good. It looks really good. He's keying. Show us your green screen. I know
It's this is a differential key. So this is NVIDIA Broadcast creating the differential key. The only problem I have is...
so it's actually, so you're not keyed when you're full size. You're keyed when you're, just when you go into the lower part.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the only problem is since I
was really impressed with the small one looked a little chunky, but the full size one, I was like, if he's keying that, I was like, I'm super impressed.
He's doing exactly what the commenter.
I know exactly. I was like, wow. So you're not. So that's an actual image, but when you're going down, you're getting a different key.
Get a differential, and that's the thing too. It doesn't, like, if it's not the full screen, it's not perfect.
Yeah, you can see it blinking a little bit on your hair.
It is, and especially since I have a more contrasty background, it works best in this screen with have the contrasty background. But before, when my background was darker, then when you missed, it would be darker.
I bet you if you had a hair light to it, I bet you it would key better. If you had more of a hair light, if you had more.
I've tried it.
Just no hair.
Yeah. Is that an ATEM thing? Is that a different?
No. That's an NVIDIA thing, right?
NVIDIA.
That's built into your system, right? It's an NVIDIA card doing that.
Yeah. So if you have an NVIDIA GPU, then you can use NVIDIA Broadcast, which will do a differential key using AI. I do find that among the differential keys, this tends to be the best. I'm hoping that since this is live in active, that they'll continue to use the AI to make it better. Because there's some things that it kind of does where you think like, okay, they could use some AI and figure that, if you figured out that this is your form,
right,
you shouldn't have any, mismatches in the proximate areas.
Yeah. Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've been doing keys for 15 years, 20 years. I am about a 10th as good as Alex is at pulling keys. And the average person who's doing this just don't think that it's like the internet kind of tells you, which is you push a button and get a good key. It takes a lot of work and a lot of understanding to get those last fine details and things like blonde hair against green screen. Those things are really difficult. So if you're really trying to get to the top of this, it's a long climb.
I mean, there's definitely tools that will let you do it. So the keyer inside of the switchers, the ATEM switchers, is actually exceptionally good. The Ultimat, if you really want to go crazy, the Ultimat 12 is unbelievable. Now, the key is for a virtual event is to key at 4K and then scale it down, because with basically the oversampling of the pixels when it comes down, that's what I was doing when I was doing keying for office hours in the early days. Is I was keying in a constellation at 4K and then bringing it down, because your switchers are running at 422 instead of 444. By keying at twice the resolution and bringing it down, you're essentially recovering some of those pixels so that you don't have any kind of aliasing across the edges. One of the other things to remember is that with your green screen, you don't have to key it perfectly because you're just sitting in front of a background. It's not a visual effects shot. So what you do is you do a soft key. So you want to neutralize your greens, and then you do a soft key and let it have a little vignetting of stuff that you didn't key. And you'll get all the hair detail back without because you don't have to push it. It just can be a little darker on the back end as long as you don't have windows. Windows and lights don't work that way. But if you have a regular neutral background, you can get away with that. And then finally, you have to match your camera position and your focal length to what you're actually using for the camera that is up front. I literally will take the camera that's on a tripod and go shoot the background with it, and then come back with it exactly in the same rotation and everything else. And now that background that I had, and if you look in the earlier days of office hours when I was using it, that background matched perfectly because all my focal points, my vanishing points all matched. And so those are some of the keys to creating a great background. You can do it. It's just a lot more work. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, is back with what are your thoughts on specialists versus generalists?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, people start off as an apprentice or a Padawan. They become a journeyman, and then they can choose to specialize. A generalist is really somebody who has looked at multiple specialities but hasn't gone as deep as a pure specialist. And then you have panels like this, which is polymaths, where they are as deep as specialists but are a generalist at the same time, so are able to specialize in multiple disciplines. All of that said, the key to being a good generalist is knowing when you're out of your depth and to ask for help.
You good, Carl?
Yeah, so what Stuart said there, the last thing he says is don't pretend you know something if you're going to be a generalist. Don't pretend you know something if you don't. It's easy to get hired as a specialist because that way the person hiring you fit a particular puzzle piece in their puzzle. A generalist is very hard for them to know where to put you into that puzzle, and sometimes that may scare them a bit. An analogy to this would be a generalist could be someone who's considered maybe high school plus, whereas a specialist is someone who's considered, maybe a degree or a postgraduate student. So that's an analogy to it, and that's maybe the way an employer will see you, even in the media world. If another thing to do is if you want to learn all the jobs, if you want to rotate, and you want to become a polymath, then that's really just specialist times by how many you want to learn. Don't consider that to be a generalist. So if you want to be a specialist in multiple areas, you need to be a specialist in multiple areas. You need to be able to go deep in, let's say, 3 or 4 areas.
You're at Sky.
I was going to try to tell an anecdote about I wouldn't ask a medical doctor to fix my
anecdotes. We get a lot of questions.
Okay. To the point then, market. What is the need in your different areas? In Los Angeles, I was able to specialize within almost a hairbreadth of not only doing promotions for animations, doing promotions for children's animations, and I was making a very nice living in that marketplace. You come up to Seattle, that's not what the business is up here. It's corporate, it's industrial, and consequently, I'm doing even more independent features and documentaries and things up here because it's more artsy, but you're not making a lot of money doing that. So you're trading off. So there is an absolute need for specialists, but it's kind of a luxury. And outside of certain marketplaces, you kind of need to generalize either in video or audio to be your main thing. And then you got to wear a lot of other hats because we're just outside. We don't have the luxury of multiple people or multiple jobs.
Yeah, Bill, real quick.
Very quickly. I know how to do lighting, I know how to do sound, and I know how to direct. I can't do all 3 at once. So I need specialists to come in because labor-wise, you just can't do 3 things incredibly well at a high level. You have to pick one.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and sometimes even in a company of specialists, they like everyone to know something about the whole process. There are some overlaps, even if you're specialized, and a lot of companies, they want everyone to have some idea about what the whole goal is going to be.
I tend to think of myself as a generalist. I have a lot of different skill sets that I can apply, and what it allows me to do is think about a problem in a lot of creative ways because I know how to fix it in a bunch of different ways, and having all of that in your head is really powerful. I then hire specialists that really know each piece. I can talk to them intelligently because I know enough about what they know to understand what they're saying. When I get into a Dante conversation, I would struggle to run a QL1 on my own. I mean, I've done it and I've set it up and I've routed it, but it would be like a thing, for me to think through that process again, because I don't do it every day. So I hire guys like Brian to do that. But I can talk to Brian about what, the DCAs and the buses and the things like that. I understand what he's talking about. So I think that's the important piece. Go ahead. Next question.
Yeah, this one's the weirdest question I've ever seen. Chris Fenwick asks, what's a good way for George Whittam to be able to enjoy a view of his bikes getting stolen from his garage? No internet available.
Go ahead, Stuart.
GPRS, not GPS, but GPRS. It's a type of dongle that you put a SIM card in that allows you to track things. Some of them have a USB socket, and you could probably hook up a USB style camera and then mount it in the frame of the bike, maybe looking at the person stalling it or where the bike's going, and you could track the bike and enjoy the view as the bike rides down the road.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Apple AirTag under the seat.
I keep on telling you, as long as just keep on going by, but it'll start beeping. I think that's the problem. is that
I
they
just
designed
typed
it
in
against that.
USB camera GPRS, and the first link came to AliExpress.
There you go. There you go.
There you go.
Next
China.
question.
Mike Emmett, Melbourne, Australia. Can the panel share their thoughts on the EU looking at mandating USB-C as the mandatory phone connector? Will the rest of the world have to suffer?
Go ahead, Stuart.
When you say the rest of the world, what you really mean is people who bought Apple phones, because the rest of the world already has USB-C connectors on their phones, and it's not going to affect us one little bit.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Stuart pretty much said it. Yeah, Apple's the only one that's going to be upset because they're, and I know a lot of Apple iPhone users who are upset that the new iPhones didn't have USB-C on them. I know you hate USB-C, Alex, but
I just think it's a stupid format. I think that it does so many different things that you don't know what it's going to do. I just think that there's, they needed to go back to the drawing board and think about like how to make a connector that just does the thing that it's supposed to do, or always has to do the thing that it's going to do. You can't have cables that don't, like selling us cables that only do power is stupid.
With versatility comes complexity,
It's just an idiotic format. So anyway, so it's just I just think that I just think it's a dumb one to tell I think it's fine that USB-C exists. I just think it's a dumb one to tell everyone they have to use. Like that's the problem with it is that telling everybody they have to use one that is obviously painfully flawed is the problem. Like it's fine for it to exist. It's fine for it to go everywhere. Just forcing people to use a stupid connector is the part that is just nuts, and so but Apple will probably Apple's on its way to getting rid of the connectors altogether, so I don't think it's going to matter. Go ahead, Noah.
I think to your point, the connector is not like the physical plug of how it's designed isn't the issue. It's the universal standard that's the issue there. Because if it was all the same power, same wattage across the board,
I was excited about it I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be stupid. I just, after years of using it, is when I've grown to just hating the format, because it's just, I don't know what cable I just bought from Amazon. I don't know what I have to test every single cable I buy to know, will this pass 900 megs a second or whatever that is, will it be 35, or will it be nothing, or will it be, and it's a horrible, as an Apple user, what you want is, I want connectors that I know what they're going to do when I plug them in 100% of the time, and the thing is that, the rest of the world likes to live in kind of a chaotic world that I don't like to live in. I just want my devices to work. So I think that my prediction is Apple will add a accessory port that has the three little prongs that you see in the iPad to their iPhone and close off the port altogether. So it'll charge via MagSafe, which is, it'll snap to something, which is it is accepted in that law, is that you can charge with MagSafe, if it doesn't have a connector. So they would just take the connector away completely. So I think that's probably where they'll go. But they'll have an accessory port that's there that can probably take power. Next question.
David Brady in New York says, I use two ATEMs, one for the graphics subswitch, the other for camera feeds and streaming. Is there a way to run the ATEM software twice on a Windows system instead of switching the connection between the two?
Go ahead, Noam.
My understanding is you can only run a single instance of that control software. However, you might Google or YouTube Doug Johnson, because he did find a workaround. I believe he used an emulator of some sort to have a second OS and then basically have two instances on one computer. But ultimately, it sounds like if it's possible for you to upgrade so that you have everything in a single switcher instead of a sub switcher, that might be a better solution long term.
Next question.
Michael in Silverado, Colorado says, is there any advantage to the MixPre 6 versus the 3 aside from the obvious one of having more inputs?
Go ahead, John. Did we lose John? He's not here. All right, next question. I guess I would say, I think that the big thing is that you can do immersive sound recording on the 6 that you can't do on the 3 because of the number of inputs. I don't think you get to real audio outputs until you get to the 10. So the 10 is where you get the XLR outputs, and that is a big jump up as far as what you can do with it. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and here on the panel says audio ear training. 1, for distinguishing frequencies. 2, for distinguishing audio latency. Is this a talent that can be learned? Are there learning drills that can help you train your ears so that you're not to rely solely on analyzation tools?
Go ahead, Carl.
Real-time analyzers are the key. You are going to use them as a professional, but a good way to train your ear is if you hear a frequency or a hum, guess what that frequency is, and then go actually check it with an analyzer, and then see if you're close. Next time you hear a hum, and you have to check it with an analyzer, and you'll get closer and closer to what the actual frequency is each time you do that. That's the best way to train your ear. As far as delay, like milliseconds delay, that's a little bit trickier. Generally, you'll hear it yourself. If you speak and then you hear yourself back, that's the easiest way to tell. Like if it's really short or really long, you can kind of tell. Again, if you hear like yourself doubling up or you're hearing a double, sync is a little bit different. So picture to audio, that's a completely different kind of thing altogether. Looking at someone's lips and doing that. But hearing yourself twice, like an echo or something, then you can guess and say, oh, that may be 100 milliseconds. Then go check. And then see if you're close. Each time you do that, you'll get closer and closer to it.
Go ahead, George.
I don't know anything about the sync or delay stuff training wise, but the look for something called golden ears training. There is some stuff online about that. There are ways to learn it without spending 25 years in audio engineering.
Go ahead, Bill.
Some things are easy, some things are not. Everybody here can tell you immediately that's a lifted ground. We know what that sounds like in at least US 60 hertz.
Not everybody does, evidently.
Well, I'm saying at the beginning of your career you
shows.
don't, but you learn it real quick because it's a distinctive sound. Other things much less so. We, in fact, here at Office Hours, we do a lot of, that's wrong, but I don't know what it is. Let's all talk about it and figure out what that weird little warbling sound is. So that's the way it works kind of sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially with sync, it's something you just see over time. You get used to what it should look like. The best way to train yourself in sync, by the way, is to record something on your phone with you talking into it and then look at it because your phone will be always on sync, right? The audio going into your phone and the video generally will be on sync. Then start to move it back and forth and see what it looks like when it's 2 frames this way or 2 frames that way. And you'll start to but watching a signal that's in sync and then also go back and try to guess and try to move it way out and try to move it back in again and then compare it to what you had before. And the way you test your ability is you take that original footage and you overlay it and you line up the audio again, and then you set the top one to difference, and it'll just show you if it's all black, then you hit it right on. If it's off by a frame or 2, then you were off. And that's how you can kind of test your ability to do sync. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, back again with Zoom order of host succession. If the original Zoom host drops out without appointing a successor host, will it fall to the co-host? But which co-host? If there are several, if there are no co-hosts, will the first attendee in the meeting inherit host?
We believe that it falls to the first co-host and then the second co-host and the third co-host that was assigned. So it's the order of assignment to the co-hosts. And we've done things where we've tested this by taking co-host away from everybody and then reassigning them in a specific order, and it will fall to them in that order. So that has been a successful test. Next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury in the UK says, if audio levels are consistent across, are audio levels consistent across Zoom meetings? In other words, if I am in one Zoom meeting and confirm I'm at -24 LUFS, would you expect me still to be at -24 LUFS when I join another meeting, or would I need to recheck?
Go ahead, George.
My experience is there's no variation as long as the app's still open and you haven't monkeyed with automatic level settings and stuff like that. It seems you should be able to jump between meetings seamlessly, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California is up next with, I'm possibly working with a TriCaster Mini for the first time in about 5 years. I've been on ATEMs in the meantime. Any things that I should look out for?
Yeah, don't do anything with it that we're required to think. So playback won't work. Graphics may not work. It's really good at switching, but without doing anything else. And don't let it encode. So you have to have an external encoder, an external graphics generator, an external playback system, and then by the time you get back to that, then it's a mini. It's an ATEM mini. Like it's a worthless piece of junk.
So I should talk him out of it. No,
it's just junk. You know, the TC1, we can talk about whether it's worth something or not. The minis are just painfully underpowered, and we have two. That's why I'm so bitter about it. And so it's just like this constant reeling. You know, our system, the system in San Francisco is Atem based, and there's another system that is tricaster based, and the number of issues that come up with those little minis is, you know, legion. You know, so it's just, they're just worthless pieces of junk. Anyway, sorry, I'm never going to get anyone from New Tech to come on after that, but I just watch the error reports all the time, and I'm just like, I don't even know, you know, it's just, I don't even know why we have these in the pipeline. So they are useful for what they are used for, but you have to basically not do anything that they say they can do to get them to actually work reliably, in my opinion. Next question.
George the Tech Whittam, who is gracing us in the panel today from Venice, California. Whittam. Oh, I'm sorry. I put an H in there. I'll take it back. Comment for the show. If your webcam freezes after 3 or so hours on your Mac M1, it could be your Sabrent USB 3 powered hub. This is experiential knowledge, I believe.
This is George.
This is the problem. I throw so many new pieces of gear into my system. And I mean, not only that, I'm also using this off-brand webcam called a Mukana AV70 or something.
Yeah, Mokos. Yeah.
And
Mikos, yeah. Yep.
It works reasonably well, and you can focus the lens manually, and it's surprisingly, yeah, you've got one.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if it was that, you know, and you have to process eliminate. So thankfully, I used my live stream show that I do every week last night to test everything and have it freeze during the show, so that today it's not. So aren't you guys lucky?
Yeah. There's a lot of us that are definitely, I think OWC is the only one that a lot of us find. Some people talk about the Cal digits, but I've had issues with Cal digits. And so the OWC ones are kind of the closest ones that most of us will consider okay to put things through. And in general, most of us won't put our video signal or we figure out how to expand all of the other signals, but we won't put our video or audio signal through anything, because the big thing is that the throughput on them tends to break down. You know,
I've got the OWC Thunderbolt 3 dock, the OG one, the one I pre-ordered and waited for and got a replacement for when it was a brick, and then and I've been using it ever since, and that has proven to be stable.
Yeah, that seems to be the only one that we know is reliably stable. Next question.
Stan Chan in Roseville, California is back with us with Focusrite RedNet versus RME TotalMix. Which is better at mixing and routing your Dante network?
I only have experience with the RedNet, and it's been a great experience. So while I will tend to slag on the Scarletts that Focusrite makes, the RedNet has been incredibly stable and incredibly useful for our purposes. We've put them into a lot of systems, and they've been very reliable. I can't say anything about the RME TotalMix because I haven't used it. It could be RME generally is a great hardware company, so I would assume that it would be great. But the RedNet has worked flawlessly for what we've done. Go ahead, George.
My experience is RME stuff has been extremely stable. The reputation of their drivers is extremely good, and learning curve's a little steep, but it's super solid stuff. But is the Scarlett stuff, Alex, just the instability of the USB driver? Is that the main problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's just literally there's no piece of hardware that has caused more tech support for me personally, because usually what happens is it stacks up. If something can't get handled for someone jumping into a Zoom, I have to come in. And so the thing is that I'm very clear of how many times I have to jump in because someone has a Scarlett, because it stops connecting, it stops passing some channel, it's mostly stops connecting, you know, and so it just shows up for me as something that I have to deal with all the time. So I'm a little bitter about that one, but I don't think that it reflects on the Focusrite RedNets, and that's why we originally got some Scarletts, was because the RedNets are so successful for us. Next question.
Brian Bevito in Detroit, Michigan's up next, and he says, Alex, you've previously discussed hotel chains that are getting on board with dual fiber ISPs. Is there a list of brands to which you've given the green light? Should we have a section on Discord for the community to chime in on approved venues?
The Win has really good. The Win and the Encore have really, really, really good infrastructure to handle it. So in Vegas, that's probably the two best. The Cosmopolitan's not bad. In general, the Four Seasons has really, really good infrastructure. Marriott is okay, and Hilton is not something I usually brace for impact. If we get into a Hilton, the IP or the IT is not great. Marriott, I have to admit that I know people to call. It's at headquarters if I need it. So I tend to lean a little bit towards that if I'm going to go to a lower one. The Four Seasons, though, is top notch. Every hotel can they can identify a port in minutes and give you exactly what you asked for, and you'll get exactly, like if you ask for 65 up and 65 down, that's exactly what you get. And so it's for, and again, these are for events, there. So and the costs, ironically, for the Four Seasons are reasonable compared to many of the other hotels, which charge you an arm and three of your legs. Go ahead, Courtney.
Is it?
So you're talking about if you're in the ballroom or doing a show from there. What
Any
about
room. Any room with an RJ45? Like it's, and generally what I am talking about, most of the events that I do are not in the hotel rooms. It's in the, most of the hotels have appreciated RJ45s, and so you have to deal with Wi-Fi for most hotels. So I'm usually talking about conference rooms or meeting rooms or those types of things of their ability to manage it. George?
Is Marriott now handling IT in-house? I always remember it was like a third party you had to contact.
Yeah, third party, but it's good third party.
It's good, yeah.
That knows what they're doing. But yeah, I wish that I would pay a lot more. Well, I pay twice. I know a lot more, but I'd pay twice for an RJ45 in my hotel room. But that seems to be something that almost everybody has gotten rid of. It's just they don't want to manage it that way. Next question.
Anthony L. in Florida is up next. He says, what platform or workflow is the safest platform to take questions privately to allow our team to answer questions live? My company manages homeowners associations, and some attendees come for education and others come to the platform to be mean.
Slido has some tools for that, and then of course we have Mukana here, which we do make available. You can, but it's expensive for a homeowners association. But Slido might be something that you want to take a look at. It'll let people do private chats where they can send the questions in and not be able to see them or vote on them. And by the way, one more hotel that I skipped was the Mandarin line are good as well as those are. Another one that I just forgot to say. Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City. I picked up a Zapp pad to have physical button controls for Zoom, but noticed that it only controls when Zoom is in the active window. Will Streamdeck control Zoom even when I'm in a different window, say typing in Mukana?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you'll need to enable the global shortcut in the Zoom preferences. So there's a little tick box next to each one. So for mute and those, you'll just need to click that little button, and then when you're out of the Zoom app, it'll apply that same shortcut. So like right now, I'll be in web browser, unmuted. So that's
great. Next question.
Anthony L. in Florida up next. Can spatial audio change the way we're experiencing streaming events? If so, do you know if anybody attempting to use spatial audio for streaming events at this point? That's
almost all I do, is spatial audio. So the answer is yes, there are people who are doing it, and it's mostly what I focus on. It's like night and day to me, but you have to hear it for a little while. The big thing is that spatial audio allows you to separate everything much more in your mind, so you can hear more of what's happening. So when you listen to music, for instance, you hear more of the instruments. They're not all muddy. Like the problem really is when you listen to a lot of spatial, stereo just sounds really muddy. There was the beginning of Foundation. I finally watched Foundation a couple days ago, and at the very beginning, the Foundation is very stingy with their spatial, so it's mostly left, right most of the time, and it's very muddy sounding at the very beginning. And every once in a while, they just go. Their sound designers decide, okay, we're gonna go like this a little bit, and then we're gonna come back forward. It's interesting to listen to it, but the it really makes a big difference. And what's interesting is things that you don't expect to make a difference, like reverb in spatial makes you feel like you're in this giant room. So even though it's only stereo or someone coming through the center speaker, it's the reverb that puts them there. Also audience mics. So you take audience mics and you throw them into left surround, right surround, left back, right back, maybe even some of your tops, and you suddenly feel like you're in the audience in a way that you don't feel when you watch something through the mics. So it's really powerful, and we're going to be doing a lot of training in spatial coming up in office hours. Next question.
Orlando, maybe Rivera in Rockaway says, do you see social VR meetings and training using Oculus Quest and so forth, like the AltSpace social VR Horizon, et cetera, growing as a production business?
Go ahead, Noah.
It's only going to keep getting better and better and more popular. And we're really just in the early stages of VR and how it can be utilized and what we can do with it.
I think it'll take a long time. I think it will get people get excited about it, but it's pretty dehumanizing right now. I mean, the thing is that really clear video is something we found to be really something that's fun to sit there and talk and walk and see people, and that's going to be really hard to reproduce virtually. And the worst part is that as we get closer, it will get worse. It will be more upsetting when we're almost there. If you look at like metahumans and you start animating metahumans, which I've done a fair bit of, as they get closer, your brain suddenly wants it to be identical. And if you look at like the Princess Leia shot in Rogue One or something like that, you realize how that bothers you, that she wasn't perfect. That quality in virtual is 10 years away. So we're 10 years away from it getting to a point where we hate it. So it's probably still a little ways away. I think video is probably a better platform for a little while. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next with Leo has said in After Hours that Belfasting a production can be analogous to flying a drone versus flying an airplane because of your lack of connection to your environment. Any thoughts on that thought?
I don't know. We do it all the time now. Like what we're considering Belfast is running hardware. The Belfast method is running hardware from virtual. I just did an event where I had someone, this last weekend where I had Nate in Utah and Brian in Savannah. Nate's doing switching on a switcher. Brian is on a mixer, mixing the audio, and we didn't think anything of it. It was as if they were in the same room. So I don't think that here's the thing: when people are at home, they're more comfortable. Like they're in the environment that they like to be in. They don't have to sit in a hotel room. They don't have to do anything. They're comfortable. They're in the chair that they like to sit in at the temperature they like to be at, dressed the way they like to be dressed. It's the future. Like it is, there's going to be issues, but I would never. And I was at home running the event, so I was at home on comms, running the event, talking to the clients, doing all the stuff. Shannon was at home doing her thing, so there was there's still people on set, but I could see us moving further and further away from that. Next question.
Comes from George Whittam here in the panel in Venice, and he says he has a link to getlumina.com and just simply asks to discuss.
Go ahead, John, real quick.
This thing screams gimmick to me, and with the web camera like this, you're never going to get an image like Carl or Josh has here.
Yeah.
I'll let you know. I'm a sucker.
Oh, you got it. How much did it cost?
Well, it's a Indiegogo.
Oh no,
I donated.
Sorry.
I've had a pretty good track record. Okay, let's keep
good.
it going.
Josh,
I'll let you know when I get it. I'll use it. You guys can tell me.
All right, Josh, good.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing that John said, and if it works, it looks like it could be a Brio killer if it works the way it says it is. I think the real problem is that people will be like, "Oh, just get this webcam. You won't have to have any lighting. You won't have to color balance."
Right.
Yeah, same issues.
Next question, real quick.
Stuart F. in Melbourne, Australia says, did anyone else watch the KiloView webinar 2 hours before office hours? And if so, what were your thoughts about the SDI HDMI encoders being able to do comms with USB headsets?
Go ahead, Stuart. Can't hear
Oh,
go ahead. We heard you there. Sorry.
I would need to speak up. It was just a interesting presentation, and they've got a lot of interesting products they're launching. The ability to do comms, as I said, basically plug in a USB headset into an encoder out at the camera, rather than to have to take any extra hardware to do it through the same IP link that you're using to get the vision back. I mean, that's almost as much as a game changer as Blackmagic's new cameras, but for everybody else.
Yeah. I think the thing is that not having a specialized comms, like we do some pretty complex things with comms. And so that having something like, we can do it now, just feels like it'll be just something else that I spend more time on, so, when I have the real money, I use ClearComm, and for most of the stuff we use Unity. And I don't know if I'd want to give up the flexibility of either one of those to just have something I could plug in to get to the camera, because I'm just running a cable out anyway. So anyway, it's interesting. We'll see. Next question.
Nick Batt in the UK says, tips for organizing vMix show templates, for example, using lists for video playback to cut down the number of inputs used.
You know, I think that what we ought to do is do a vMix. I think there's like we're doing with Flow8 today, and we're running a little late, but we'll finish in a minute. I think it'd be good to do a vMix Q&A. Do people think that that's a good idea? I think like there's enough of us using vMix of just like troubleshooting and thinking about it and everything else. And so I think that we'll plan that in the near future of just having like a Wednesday that we just spend an hour just doing Q&A about vMix, because I think there's a lot of those. I don't have the answer for Nick today, but we'll stay tuned to our schedule and we'll try to see if we can aggregate a bunch of vMix experts. Next question. Douglas
Carmichael asks, has anyone ever used Revoice or Vocaline to solve sync issues?
I have not, and I'm not even familiar with those. So we'll have to take a look at them. Next question.
And the last one in the regular queue, Michael in Silverado, California says, did anyone on the panel try the Wave XLR? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Again, I've been asked something that I don't think I'm familiar with. So we'll have to we'll take a look at it. Go ahead, Josh.
I don't have any personal experience with it either, but I think if you're in the Wave ecosystem or the Elgato ecosystem, seems like it provides your XLRs with something that can hook into that system.
Excellent. All right. Now we're going to change subjects and direction and go and move into our discussion about the Flow8. We decided to do the Flow8 discussion because there's so many people looking at it and so many people in our group buying them, and they are an incredible value. Like, I think that, as I said before, I have to use something that can do noise assist and so on and so forth, but I still think I might play with one because it's just such a great little box. And so I don't know, Carl, if I just want, before I jump into the questions, I want to know that if you built a deck, because Carl's prone to build.
I don't have a deck. I kind of have just a picture I can zoom in and out of if I'm talking about something.
So why don't you tell people what we're, just to set this up. Carl will tell us a little about the Flow8, and then we'll move into Q&A.
All right, so this is the Flow8. So essentially, it's 8-channel in. It has 4 microphone channels and 4 line channels and 2 instrument channels as part of those line channels, as you can see. So essentially, the way it kind of works is it's really good at streaming, and it's really good for recording. For production, like if you're doing like a large live production, then I would say Mix Pre 10. That's kind of where you're going up to a different level. But this is really good for office hours and really good for a small band doing a recording as well. So small bands is really where this comes in. It does have the faders, physical faders, which is one pickup over some production ones, which are smaller and they're more like on-set mixers. And it also has XLR outputs. So again, for a small band, it needs to go out to a PA system. That's another thing. And it does have a really big dial with LEDs that tell you exactly what volume your main is out. So you know if you're muted, that'll not be there. So other than that, we will go to the questions. We have a lot of questions, but that's just a basic overview of what it is.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into the questions.
First one comes from Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia, and he says, if the audio pros on the panel were to be super critical of the Flow8, what's one flaw you can't forgive of it?
Go ahead, Carl.
At the moment, the only thing is recording, no USB recording. So that's the only thing. It's not meant for that, but if I have to, that's the only thing, but it's not designed for that.
Go ahead, George.
I know I was digging on it earlier saying it's not sound devices, but I will tell you from experience now that Behringer has really stepped it up. And since I think they acquired Midas, there's a lot of trickle down from Midas, and their stuff's just getting more and more stable, reliable. Sound quality is improving. I mean, it's hard for me I haven't used it in the real world, but I haven't found anything to knock it yet. Just support, and the support is a big thing. When you're getting into more mission critical stuff, having the support and a company like Sound Devices backing you, that's really, again, what you're beyond just quality of the hardware, you're paying for support, and that support is, I think, crucial. I don't know if you're going to get that from Behringer.
For me, the big thing is the noise assist. Like, it's just that's such a key thing to have on my system. If the Flow8 had noise assist, I would probably replace what I'm using now with the Flow8 to do that. And I'm still thinking about it, even just to test it. But that's the big problem is I have enough things going on in my office, little fans and stuff like that, that I feel like I really get it cleaned up. The mixture of the mic with what I have here and everything else kind of cleans up most of the background. Go ahead, Guy.
I guess the ruggedness of the unit, if you're taking this out in the field compared to some of the other stuff, like when I look at this, this is solid metal. If I drop this, if I throw it across the room, I know it's still going to work. It's one of those things where even a small hit on Flow8, if I'm being super critical, Mackies are the same way. Well, I take that back. My Mackie, it's been through war and it still works. Oh, the faders are a little rough, but that's just the thing with especially rentals and things like that go out and get abused. This is not a rental item. This is something that you would use personally. Again, that's just me being super critical.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
And I purposely waited until all the pros already had their say about it. I will say it's a compromise. Every tool is a compromise. And really the value that comes in with the Flow8 is that they give you the flexibility with, say, the app. It's a nice way of pushing features in that you wouldn't get at this price point or availability. But then the compromise is that you have an app. So you might want a larger platform. You don't get a larger platform. It's smaller because of that, but because of the compromise.
Are the sliders motorized?
No.
So you can move things up in the app that aren't related to the slider.
Yes, that's what the offset light is. So there's an offset light above each fader there, and that offset light will tell you if the fader does not represent the true value of the digital mixer.
Very good. All right. That would be another thing for me. I'm really used to motorized sliders. Like if I'm going to have software, I kind of need to know where the slider is. Like I would do a Flow8 Plus with motorized sliders and noise assist for $600. I'd buy it. Cause I'd love to have that. That's one thing from the Mix Pre that I would love to have the sliders, in that side, which I guess I could do with a Korg if I wanted to. Next question.
Jacob Goodnight's up next from Indianapolis, Indiana. He says, is there anywhere in the U.S. with the Flow8 in stock?
Go ahead, Carl.
No. So at the moment, Sweetwater's out because it's quite popular. If you just purchase it on Sweetwater, essentially you're kind of like doing a pre-order, a back order. You'll probably get it a little bit slower than if you get it from Anderton's or Toman in Europe. Anderton's are nice. They'll actually give you a power adapter as well. It is a 2 amp power supply. So we have had people who you actually have to use that power supply, or if you've got a 2 amp power supply, that's also a micro USB. But just be aware of that.
Go ahead, George.
You can get it from the enterprising folks that buy one when they come out, test it, and then put it on eBay for twice what it's worth. I just literally looked there. $500-$600.
Yeah, $500-$600.
That's so funny. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, and he says Flow8 or Zoom L8.
I feel like they're different. The Zoom L8, I think that's the one that looks like a spider, right? It's looks like the back of a spider. Is that the L8?
It's just a console.
It's just a console. It's not very good though. I've played around with the L20, which is a bigger brother, but it's exactly the same components. Yeah. Not very good.
Yeah, I got some of the ones that had sliders. Like it was a 16-channel one that they did early on, and their propensity to really sound bad if they got close to, if they overmodulated, was like something like I can't use this.
Headroom.
Yeah,
That's what they cheese out on cheaper gears. You lose headroom, and clipping it sounds so bad.
Yeah, so bad. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, our friend, the mic collector, Paul Wallace, had the L8 as recommended by a used console supplier that we all know, and it was horrible. I thought it had a bunch of faders, but yeah, I think the Flow8, seeing the user interface, I hope Carl's going to show us, the software and stuff. Super cool.
Yeah. Next question.
Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia, says, I need to send a mix minus back into a Zoom meeting and the main mix out to another meeting or stream. What's the most efficient way to do this on the Flow8?
Go ahead, Carl.
So you'll need to be in recording mode for this one. You'll need to actually plug in a patch cable. So this is the only thing you'll have to do. This is kind of something, I understand why I've done this because you get a feedback if you don't, but you'll need to plug your monitor out 1 and 2 into input 3 and 4. And then you'll have, because you have 10 outputs from the device in recording mode, you need to take, channel 3 and channel 4 and map them to whatever apps you want to do. Loopback and audio hijack is the best way to do that if you're on a Mac, of course. But yes, it can be done, but you just need a patch cable just to balance. It'd be balanced all the way through too, so no harm. It'll be balanced.
Yeah, go ahead, John. Oh, did we lose John? John Edelson answering here, and I don't. Next, go ahead, Chris.
Carl, could you put that slide up one more time? I was just curious, is that some sort of a wireless connection, or how does one connect to the other? I'm sorry. I
It's just a patch cable.
There we go. Next question.
Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia is up next, and he says, is it possible to make a monitor mix on the USB output on the Flow8?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I just said. So essentially what you do is you take the monitor out, which is a 2 on the right-hand side here, just underneath the main outputs. So, and you'll patch them back in via, so you'll take these 2 here on the underneath the main outs, and you'll patch them in to essentially the 2 here that are either channel 3 and channel 4. Then channel 3 and channel 4 on your USB back into the computer can be sent to wherever you want. Can be sent to Zoom meetings, can be sent to recording, whatever you want. But they're your monitor channels.
So these are like tiny little 1/4-inch jumpers, right? They're
just 1/4-inch to 1/4-inch, but balanced. Yeah, TRS. Just that's all they are. And essentially, what you're doing is, because the thing is, I understand why they don't have essentially you'd be making it like 11 and 12, channel 11, 12 back to the computer via USB would be monitor. The reason they don't do that is because there's another feature which is very cool, which would cause an instant feedback.
Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael. Douglas says, the Flow has a MIDI implementation as shown on page 19 in their quick start guide. Could you see applications for it in simple automated workflows with Isadora and so forth?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yep, definitely. So it's going to answer another question later on, but I'll leave that till later. The MIDI implementation in this is pretty fully featured. The only thing you can't do is some system level stuff like factory reset, that kind of stuff you can't do via MIDI, which is kind of understandable. But pretty much all the audio pathways you can do, and even the snapshots you can do. So you can go between snapshots with MIDI. So it can all be remoted in. So pretty much you can do everything you can do via MIDI, so which can be over the internet or local.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, right back with what made you choose the Flow versus other small mixers like the Allen and Heath Z series?
Go ahead, Carl.
All right, so the Allen Heath Z series and some others, and Behringer used to make the U series back in the day. They are analog mixers that actually just have a multi-channel USB interface in them. There's a lot of these, so they're actually analog all the way through. Then when you get to the A to D converter, which is just a chipset which goes through the USB, it's taking those direct outs, let's say 8+2, which some of the Allen Heath do. So that's actually an analog mixer with a USB audio interface built in. What this is a digital audio mixer. It's not an analog audio mixer, which means that the only thing in here that's analog technically is the gain and the output stages. Everything else is digital, which means that firmware updates can change stuff, which we've already seen, and which means you can route stuff I'll show that in a second, but how you can route, you cannot do that on an analog mixer.
Next question.
James in Dublin.
George, do you want to say something real quick?
Just another thing, just in using all these really low-end cheap mixers for so many years in only studios, one advantage of a digital mixer, theoretically, is the switches won't get scratchy because they're just contacts turning things on and off. And like a Mackie mixer, which I've done 1,000 of them over the years, the pots aren't very well sealed. They get dusty and scratchy. And in a digital system, you're not going to have any of those scratchy pot bad button problems, theoretically. So that's a little advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
And again, it's James in Dublin, Ireland. The Pyle and Polson headsets are popular office hours headset mics. Can they be used with the Flow8? And if so, can you please describe how to set one up, since it only has a 3.5 millimeter mini jack with a TS connector?
Good, Carl.
Yeah, so your one is a TS male 1/4 inch to TS female 3.5. Essentially, it's taking your TS 3.5 and making it larger, so it will fit into you'll be putting it into 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 have line level. The cool thing is there you can actually play with them. There are other ways to actually get it into the XLR as well, and you can put it into the instrument level as well.
And will 3 and 4 power it?
So 1 and 2 will power, and this is where you can actually get you can use a XLR to a female 3.5 TS. But what you need to do is you actually may need to get a TRS female that mixes down, so it's going to sound really hot and cold. Won't be balanced technically. It's going to send the same signal down both, but there is a way of doing it. There are other ways, but there's usually little adapters you'll need, and usually the manufacturers who make these little headsets usually have adapters out to XLR. That's usually the best one. Just look for an adapter out to XLR made from these manufacturers, because those adapters are wired correctly internally.
Next question.
Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia says, what's the best kept secret of the Flow8?
Best kept secret.
Kind of in the manual, but it's a MIDI. So full MIDI implementation. Right. Now it's MIDI in, not MIDI out, so you can't control your DAW with it. But full MIDI in, which you can do over the internet using certain apps, even Google Chrome extensions.
So this would be another way we were talking about tying it into something like Isadora, which we're talking about on Friday. You could actually just control everything inside of it, with that interface. Very interesting. Next question.
Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota says, can you save and share a scene with the Flow8?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yes, you can save a scene in the actual Flow8 hardware. You can save a scene in the phone. They're two separate saves. You can't share with someone else. So that's something, unless you actually give someone your Flow8 or give someone else your phone. But no, you can't share scenes. Like you can't you can't be packaged and send them like a text message or an email. So that's not possible. But yet, that could be an update, but at the moment it's local only.
I will say that that's something that's really useful about the Mix Pre is that we have scenes that we share across, like we have to configure 15 Mix Pre's. And so being able to just cut and paste the scene files between them is important once we've gone through the trouble of getting them set up just right. Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland is back with, could the Flow8 be configured to control audio to two different Zoom meetings, allowing audio into only one at a time?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, it definitely can, because you have recording mode as well, which gives you 10 channels out. So you can have each channel going in, each channel going out. And as I said, you can actually patch your monitors into two of the other channels. And so you can actually have three complete different mixes going to three different channels out.
Next question.
Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana says, does the Flow8 have the ability to delay an audio signal for syncing purposes?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yep, it sure does. So the main have syncing, and the main actually goes out via analog and via digital. And again, the monitor also has syncing. They have independent syncing on the monitors. So technically you have three different syncs you could do, up to 1/3 of a second. And yeah, as I said, you just have to repatch. The headphones don't have any effect on syncing. So your headphones that you're hearing are like a direct pass-through. So the audio delay or any syncing changes or audio delay you put into it will not affect the headphone.
Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland up next with, how would the audio quality of the Flow8 compare to the Motu M2?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the Motu M2, which is a lower price stuff, would nowhere near. So this is up with the Mix Pre. So the first two channels in this, they're not technically in the manual, not called this. I don't know why, because they're not a combo jack, but they're actually what's called the Midas Pro preamps, which are found in the Wing and in the brand new Midas stuff that's going to be coming out soon. It's not in any Midas stuff that's out yet, because Midas haven't released it. The Wing and this are the first two of that series. And it's, if you take a look on the spec sheet, you'll actually see the first two inputs are very high quality. The next two inputs are pretty much the Midas inputs that we're used to. So the Midas inputs are very good quality from Midas. They're the 3 and 4 essentially. They're the combo jacks. The first two are only XLR, and they're the ones that have fan and power. They don't have combo jacks, which makes them a lot quieter.
Next question.
Ronnie Settle in La Plata, Maryland is up next with, what is the lowest latency one can achieve over a USB connection?
Oh, go ahead, Carl.
It's less than a millisecond. So This is in the manual, and I've actually tested it. So if you go in and out, USB to USB, it depends if you're recording. If you're recording in a DAW, then that's different because you're coming back out of a DAW. But if you're going into, let's say, Core Audio and coming back out of Core Audio, it's about a millisecond.
Next question.
Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis. Does the Flow8 have enough clean gain to drive a Shure SM7B?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, sure it does. So it's 60 clean gain easily, and you get another 20 on top of that as well. So it's and we've actually done that with Summon and After Hours, and it came out very nice.
Next question.
Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana. Is there a way to control a Flow8 via a companion or Streamdeck?
Go ahead, Carl.
So there is, as we mentioned, there's a MIDI. So Companion has these MIDI pass-through commands, and so Companion can actually take a MIDI pass-through command and send it to this. Not a problem.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Carl, you mentioned the Flow8 would be useful for small bands. Wouldn't you need a stereo pair for overhead drums?
Good, Carl.
You sure do. So 5, 6, and 7, 8 are stereo pairs. So you can consider like, well, I wouldn't say overhead drums. Most gigging people now usually have electronic drums. So just have stereo straight into electronic drums, or that is mic'd in stereo. So they can actually have a drum mixer. So the drum will actually have a little mixer to them, so they can do their own mix. And then they send that out as a stereo to the board for this. And then, so you do have 2 stereo pairs.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington says, how do you compare this to the Rodecaster Pro with the Flow8?
Go ahead, George.
Just hearing everything about the Flow8, from what I'm hearing and learning from Carl, because I'm literally learning about it right now, the Flow8 is way more flexible, like in terms of its power under the hood. The Rodecaster Pro is the opposite in terms of flexibility. It's designed to be super simple and easy to get running and set it up and record. And that's its strength. And I have one here, and I can tell you, it's just, if someone says, "Can you record that?" I go, "Yep," and I mash this giant green button, and it's recording everything. It records 14 channels simultaneously all the time. You have no choice, and that's its Pro. So it's two very different animals, but just pure sound quality wise, I've been very impressed with the Rodecaster over the last 2 years. I've had no complaints about quality of audio. So if we're just talking about purity of sound, I think they probably stack up. But those Midas preamps, those are legit.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana says, is there a workaround to achieve noise assist like a noise assist like effect using a Flow8 gate or noise reduction via audio hijack?
Go ahead, Carl.
There is, so the Parametric EQ. So this is something I've done quite a lot for this, but you will need a analyzer. So you'll need to know what frequencies are coming in, and essentially you're just doing a manual static version of noise assist. Noise assist is automatic and it's dynamic. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but it doesn't cost $300. It only costs a little bit of your time.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say that noise reduction itself can be a very complicated thing if it's done really well, because it's analyzing the frequencies coming in, making some intelligent or computer intelligent decisions about what is noise and what is signal, trying to suppress the noise and still pass all of the signal, which is not a trivial task, which is why that Cedar and Noise Assist and these companies that specialize it are the ones who do it well. It's not just a click-on thing. Go ahead, George.
He mentioned that he'd be willing to use like a third-party application. So once you open into a DAW or something else, you've got a huge array of tools. I have stumbled on, and now I'm really loving a plugin called Bertom, BERTOM denoiser, and it's honorware. It's basically pay what you want, which is really nice license, and it's very much like a super affordable Cedar. It's excellent. It's tunable and it works really, really, really well. So if you are willing to monkey around with a little bit more, patching of audio in your system, that one is an excellent alternative if you're on a budget and you're not, if you want it to be all in the hardware, MixPre is clearly the tool.
You can also get a DNS too from Cedar. It's only
how many Alexes is that?
That's a couple. It's maybe 5. Anyway, maybe you can find a used one for 3.
They do make a little portable 2-channel preamp. Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah. I mean, that's a value unit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's good.
It's good. The one that the DN, I think it's the DNS1 is the one that's the coolest because it's got sliders, and so there's Cedar makes a DNS2, a DNS, I think it's DNS1, and then there's the DNS8. The DNS8 you can use as inserts into your mixer, so you can have 8 individual DNS channels. It's pretty cool at that scale, but I don't think in the small scale it's competitive. Next question.
If you're relying on a Flow8, that would be a surprise to me.
I just want to take a picture of my Flow8 and then say the Flow8 didn't have noise assist, so I added a Cedar. All right, next question.
Rotem Kish and Mazkurit Batia, and I'm pronouncing that wrong, but hi, Rotem in Israel. Is there a way to add delay to Flow8 in Windows without using potato?
No vegetables. Go ahead, Carl.
So the Flow8 can actually do the delay itself in the hardware. So you can actually do it before it hits Windows. As far as doing it after that, I'm not too sure. I don't use Windows. As far as system level stuff, I'm pretty sure most of the people on this panel who do use Windows use something like Potato though.
Or celery. Next question.
Sorry, it makes me laugh. George Whittam is back from Venice, and here in the panel, comparison, the PreSonus Revelator IO24. I'm using it now with something unknown.
I assume, George, you're talking about comparing that to the Flow8.
Yeah, so I guess they're just different feature sets, and but what I like about the Revelator is because it's a revelation. I'm just using it for the first time. Is that it's $200 USB stereo mic preamp looking device on the front. It looks like a Scarlett, but on the inside, it's DSP with a full-blown channel strip on every channel input, and then it has virtual return channels that show up in your sound driver. So when you're trying to do a lot more in the box stuff, like if you want like the hosting shows you want to do live stream playbacks, and you want to have control over mixing multiple sources. I've never seen anything that does it as easily as this. It's a different beast, but in terms of wanting to have some control over your sound while live streaming, like I'm doing right now, I've got a full-blown channel strip with high-pass filter, gate, compressor, EQ, and limiter. And it's a brilliant piece of gear so far. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I happen to be using it. I just got it. And had I known about the Flow8 and found one, I probably would have gotten one of those. But this is just a different tool. There's no physical interface. It's all, other than the gain knob on the front, it's all on screen. So that's probably going to be a deal breaker for some. And I do find it in a live environment, I still would rather reach over and smack a mute on my Rodecaster. So, mileage may vary. Depends on how much live interface interaction you need to do with your equipment. That's the rear of it. Yeah. And it's a efficiently packaged device. It's compact. And
what I find interesting is that, we control a lot of our stuff with, we send down an M1 with our smaller kits. And so what I'm looking at here is finally something that I can control everything, levels, I assume levels and everything else, via its connection to the computer. So it could theoretically, again, for me, the worst part though is that when I send all these out, one of the reasons I send it out is because I have noise assist. I can send it to some random person's house, and I can get rid of their fan and everything else. It's funny that Sound Devices spent years working on that. Like they've talked about it on our show. They spent years building it up, and it's such a lock-in. So you look at everybody else and you go, "Oh, that's really great," but I don't have that. And so it's really hard, because if you have a good mic and you have a good space, it doesn't matter. But when you're sending these kits out or you're using them, it becomes really.
Yeah, the other alternative is the Apollo stuff. If you drink the Apollo Kool-Aid like I have for the last 10 years, this has a plugin now from Cedar called C-Suite. So essentially, you have Cedar in this.
And how much is it? How much is it? I bet it's $300.
Plugin's $300.
Yeah, I wonder.
300.
It used to be a lot more. Like the Cedar stuff used to be a lot more expensive, and then Noise Assist came out at $300, and that kind of just set the.
That's the bar for price. I think that for licensing plugins, Manly mic preamps, the big handmade point-to-point tube equipment made in California, they license their stuff to Apollo, which it seemed like an over my dead body thing, but they must be making a great licensing fee on every plugin,
No, absolutely. Next question.
Idris Hagi of Fairfax, Virginia is up next with, does the Flow8 have enough gain to support the Shure SM7B?
And I think we had this one earlier.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Does the Flow8, George Whittam, I'll get that right, George.
Whittam
in Venice. Yeah. Does the Flow8 share the DSP from the X-Air systems?
Go ahead, Carl.
Definitely not. So it's wing. So this is a baby wing. So I've kind of looked into this, and I've tried to look deeper and deeper into it. It turns out this has one of the basic chipsets of the wing. I believe that the USB chipset is a little different because it doesn't need to have 40 channels or 32 channels, whatever it has. So it has a different chipset as far as the analog to digital kind of converter, that kind of thing. Well, actually, they're per channel actually. But yeah, it is a baby wing in essence.
Next question.
John Pareto is tweaking Carl. Carl, did Behringer send you your influencer check yet? Laughs out loud and said, thanks for your time and wisdom. So it's more comment.
Yes,
I will
Carl.
accept synthesizers in regards to checks. That's fine. Just send me synthesizers early. I'll be happy.
Well, you can see why before I scheduled the Flow8 Tuesday, I got on Discord and I pinged Carl. I was like, you can come Tuesday, right? You can show up. If you can't show up, I'm not going to schedule it. So anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's next, and he says, what can the Flow8 do that the MixPre 8 series cannot?
Go ahead, Carl.
The MixPre series, you could probably get 3 of them for a MixPre 3, 4 of them for a MixPre 6, and so that's kind of where it sits. The MixPre is a more expensive item, but it does a little bit more. You have the ability to get noise assist. It can record internally, so you are getting more for your money. There's no doubt about that. But for $250, $260, $270 US, this kind of knocks it out of the park for what we do here, for what small bands do, for what people in their bedrooms making music do, acoustic music with guitars, synthesize, that kind of stuff. So this actually does a lot more in that regards, to where MixPre is more for a production. So an AV production it works in that workflow much better because that's what it was designed for. It wasn't designed for a band on stage.
Good guy.
I just got to throw that the 8 series has Dante on there. So it's a whole other world, and we can do frame.io as camera to cloud. So there are some things when you get up to the $8,300 level with the Scorpio and the 888 that
there's the mix pre, and then there's just this whole other cliff, of because what I use here is a Scorpio, and it's quite a machine. Like I've never seen so much mixing capacity in such a small package ever. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. Up next, the noise assist on MixPre 3.2 is $300 for each channel. With the Flow8 having the ability for a firmware update, could they offer their own version of the noise assist?
Go ahead, Carl.
That's up to whether the actual DSP inside is powerful enough to do it. My guess, it could do it for 2 channels. I don't think it'd be able to do it for all 8. And the 8, all channels are a little bit different. So the 1 and 2 are different to 3 and 4, which are different to 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. My guess is they could do it for 2 channons, just like they do fan and power for 2 channels. That could be something they could do, but at the moment, that's something actually they don't do too much of on their other mixers. They kind of have these other inbuilt stuff they have, which is where the wing sits. So you kind of got this and the wing, and the X32 is not going anywhere.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I don't know what's inside the heart of this chip, but that sounds like a field programmable gate array kind of task rather than just how much processing power. I mean, they'll have to have a lot of grunt to do that.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does have an FPGA, but the question really is, remember that the MixPre 1 didn't have enough horsepower to put noise assist in it. So it is not a light processing unit to do that. That's why it's so limited. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next with, what has your experience been with the Behringer Music Group service and support?
Go ahead, Carl.
They actually have a community. So they actually have a community, which is part of the website. You can go to the community tab, and they'll pretty much just like Apple community is another way of kind of looking at it. So you can actually have people who are in there who will give you questions, like the Apple ones, but also you'll actually have staff members. The quickest way to get a reply is Facebook. So Facebook seems to be the quickest way, and they will reply to you really fast on Facebook because that is really public to them. So if you go to them with an issue that's a real issue, and like you've actually done the faults, you've done all your testing to make sure it's not just a human error, software error, then yeah, they'll get back to you really fast on Facebook.
Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. I'd like to use the Flow8 with the Zoom H6, or would you replace the H6 with the Flow8? Just asking.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Well, the H6 records. So that's actually kind of where the H6 would sit with this. If you're only streaming, then the Flow8 can sit by itself. If you want to record like remotely, then the H6 can be added to the output of this.
Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia, back again with, could the Flow8 be a good use in a mobile setup?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, that's kind of where this is king. You can actually power it off a battery pack that can handle 2 amps. So some battery packs can actually handle 2 amps out of the USB. So this can actually run off a battery pack and not just off the wall. But in a mobile setup where you have access to AC power, still this is really cool as far as how it works. It is standalone. You don't need a computer to run it. You can just run it standalone, and all you need is an iPhone. Technically, you don't need an iPhone if you have a snapshot. So if you have a snapshot loaded, you can put your iPhone away.
Next question.
Tony has another question here. Would the Flow8 be the best low-cost digital mixer?
Go ahead, Carl.
By far, yeah. So it's like you have to spend 3 times the amount of money before you start getting the same features.
Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore, Malaysia says, does the Flow8 have auto mix features, a Dugan auto mix type thing?
Go ahead, Carl.
No, so XR18 is your first step in Behringer line to get up to there. So which is around $700, $800 US.
I will say Behringer is also, we used to just make so much fun of Behringer. Like it was just, it was just this constant, just attack on Behringer hardware. And they, I think it was really from the purchase of Midas that they just brought a different engineering team in, or different point of view. It wasn't just that the preamps got better. It was just that everything seems to have improved over that time. And we've just seen a lot of improvement. But what's really interesting about Behringer is this near seamless, from the $250 range or so all the way up into the wings and everything else. They just have a very you need a little bit more. We have something that has a little bit more. You need a little bit more of this. We have that. It's just they've done that business model exceptionally well, and very and you really feel like you're getting really value. It has a lot for what you're paying for it. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I think another thing that hurt Behringer's reputation is their propensity to knock off Mackie mixers in a pretty pretty
Still over
egregious
density.
way.
Or knock
And-
off everybody.
Yeah,
That
use the
is
word
kind of a
copy.
very dangerous thing.
Yeah,
Like, I
and
will
that-
save engineering.
Yeah, but they've somehow managed to weather that and keep going and innovate. And this Flow8 is a sign of that. You know, I hope the power supply in there is good. You know, I hope you get more than 2 years out of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City up next with, given the lengthy tutorials Carl has done it on after hours, could he briefly talk through the Flow's setup for office hours with a simple mic flow into a Mac or PC audio chain?
Good, Carl.
All right, so seeing as we're getting through the questions pretty quickly here, I'll slow down a little bit and actually go through the interface and the routing. So this is the USB interface. So essentially, this is actually live, so you can actually see my voice coming in on channel 1 and going out the main. And then the return for you guys coming in from Zoom is coming through the Bluetooth USB channel, so the blue channel. So the routing that we can actually set up, if we go in here, we can go into routing. So it's actually pretty, so I'm in streaming at the moment. I can hit recording, which gives me 10 outputs to the computer. I won't do that while I'm on Zoom at the moment. But so I've actually got you guys coming in. So the bottom left down here where it says USB play, you can either go to the main mix. If I do that, you guys will hear yourself. So I don't want to do that. I want to go phones only. And that's going to my in-ears. And then from the PC, I can actually route it on the right-hand side here where the blue is. I can actually route from the PC. There's 4 channels that come in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I can route that to channel. So actually, I will do that now, and we'll see what it looks like in the interface. So I'll bring them in. Don't talk too much because you'll probably hear yourself. So here you can actually see it. So we're actually seeing here now, we actually have channels 5, 6, 7, 8 are now USB in from the computer, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. And I've also got the Bluetooth in. So that Bluetooth is still coming in. So it actually gives you quite a lot of flexibility there. And this is across the main mix, monitor 1 mix, and monitor 2 mix, which I'm changing at the top here. I'll go back to routing and I'll turn them off. Underneath, I can actually do a bent pipe. So the bent pipe is the one underneath here, and I can actually bent pipe monitor out from, so it brings it straight in from the computer. Only one of these can be set because it's a stereo, so you can't set both, of course. So I can actually take USB 1 and 2 coming in from the computer and bent pipe them straight out of the monitors. There's nothing else. Essentially, that works like an audio interface, where it's a bent pipe for the output. You don't change the volume or anything like that. Up the top left here, we have the phones. So the phones can actually be another output that you can actually have a stereo output. You can actually have it as a stereo link as well. So we can actually have the stereo link of the monitors coming out of the phones as well, which is pretty cool. Now, as far as preferences, this is where it gets into quite interesting how much flexibility there is in this. So you can actually have, as you can see, the output load, which is on the right-hand side here. You can actually have the output pad negative 10 dB. So you can go out to consumer devices, consumer recording stuff. It does go out at +4. Now you can have actually all these kind of always on as far as the app state, you can always have as always on. So the app state will always show if you're changing a mixer. And I've got fully parametric set up here down the bottom right-hand corner. And you can do a MIDI dump as well. So MIDI dump means you can actually MIDI dump the entire setup into a MIDI save file. That's one way you can actually save it. So you can actually save out all the MIDI settings to a MIDI dump, and then you can bring them back in. So that is one way you can share, but you have to do it via MIDI, not via the proprietary. So let's take a look at the fully parametric EQ. So if I go to the channel, I won't go to channel 1 because that's the one I won't go to, let's go to channel 1, the one I'm on. So this is the channel I'm on. I've got 4 parameters. So up the top, we've got gain, which I'm at 54, which is what this microphone is. This microphone is negative 54. So I'm essentially bringing it up to unity gain. Low cut, I've got to nothing. And then the level, you can see I've got +3 at the moment. And that's generally when build tells me go up a little bit, go down a little bit. +3 is where I'm sitting at the moment. Now, as far as fully parametric, if I actually touch on here, we actually see the fully parametric. So at the moment, it's set to nothing, it's flat. With the full range, I can touch it on the top right-hand corner here. And so that actually will go all the way down to 20 hertz. And there's 4 of these per channel, per input. And it goes all the way up to 20,000 hertz. So you get 4 of these, and you can actually choose a width as well. So the width will go all the way from extremely narrow. It's a bit odd how these numbers work, but 20 means extremely narrow. So that's really a notch filter or peaking, and then extremely broad. That's how these numbers work. So some people get a little bit confused with this, but this particular numbering convention means extremely narrow. So we can actually do that. So let's pick around my voice, so don't worry about there, and let's take it out. So if I take it out, and then I bring this down, you'll notice my voice changing. And then I can sweep across the parametric EQ, and you'll notice my voice changing quite a bit as I do this. Anyway, fully parametric EQ, you can reset all the bands. There we go, reset, and we'll come back out.
Might have been
But
bypassed. Was it
it
bypassed?
probably was because I'm on original. I've got original sound turned off.
Oh, okay,
So,
gotcha.
so
So it was fighting.
it was
I could
probably
hear it
very subtle. It's
changing.
probably very
I
subtle
could
how
hear it
much
changing, but it was fighting the original,
the
Oh,
original
that's
sound.
audio. Yeah.
But we all know how. But you've got 4 of those, and they're all the same. So turn on fully parametric, and there's 4 of those per band. So it's very powerful in regards to how that works. You can turn on phantom power here. So phantom power, you can mute and solo just like you can with any other mixer. It has compressor. So it does have compressor on all the channels. So even on the stereo input channels, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, where you don't get compressor is going to be here on the USBs. So you notice compressor's grayed out, low cut is grayed out, and gain is grayed out. You do have independent levels, but also on the USB, which is really cool, you have fully parametric on the USB as well. So you can still do fully parametric on the USBs. That's a pretty big feature, considering you can actually have audio coming in from USB, it can be from another device as well, from another mixer in a way. And so that's actually another big powerful feature. The FX, quickly, there are a lot of FX in here. So there's one that's reverb based, so spatial based reverb. So we have reverbs, choruses, all that kind of stuff. And then the other one is modulation based or a time effect. And we actually see down here the tap tempo, because we're going to have choruses, echoes, delays. So, and you can mix these two. The important thing is with these is you actually mix in the wet dry, the amount of wet dry per channel. So you can have vocals up 1, and you can have your guitar have more. So let's say having guitar actually down here, which would be on probably the instrument level. And you can have your guitar have a lot more than what you would have for your vocals. And so you can actually have the exact same effect, but have different wet drive mixes in there as well. There is a stage mode. So if you're on stage and you just want stuff to be very simple, just volumes, that's what you're doing. This is a stage mode. So you have a simple up down for your volumes and a master fader, or the mixer mode, which looks more like a mixer. So the other big thing in here is we have the mixer snapshots. So the snapshots libraries. So here we have my office hours snapshot, which I can load up. You can choose on the right-hand side, what does it load? And hit the I button, will tell you what each of these are. So this is actually on the phone. On the actual machine itself, this is the same thing. So it's got the office hour snapshot, which is the same. Then I've got a flat 96. So this is this microphone, but flat. And that's what we're currently on now, because I'm using original sound off. The office hours one actually has it tuned in for my lights. So as far as a fan. And then you can configure the inputs. So you can rename the inputs. You can do quite a lot as far as if you choose to want to rename stuff. But the biggest page is obviously the routing that we went through before. The main thing about the routing is there's a lot of people use it very differently. So you can actually route this thing 10 different ways to get the same result. And that's where this is kind of flexible, because I know there's a lot of people in office hours that actually own these, and we all have them routed very differently, but we're all kind of using them the same way. So the routing page is usually the big one. We'll pop back out there and we'll go back to any questions.
Next question.
Okay, I wanted to, while you're
George.
screen
Sorry,
sharing, I wanted to, can you show us how the driver appears in your PC or Mac? What do I see as input and output channels if you go to your...
There are no drivers, so it's core
Okay.
audio. So there is a Windows audio drivers that you get, which are basic audio drivers for all stuff that, kind of audio, but it doesn't require any drivers. It's core audio. It shows up as 48, 32-bit integer. It's not float, it's actually integer.
But how many channels do you see as an input?
You
and
see,
output
so
device?
it depends. So if you're I'll bring it back here to routing. So when you're in streaming, you'll see 2 channels going into the computer and 4 channels coming out of the computer to the Flow8. If you're in recording, you'll see 10 channels going from the Flow8 to the computer, and then 4 channels coming back in as well.
Cool, thank you.
Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York is the next questioner up. Is talking about preamps and general audio quality. How does the Flow8 compare to like the XR18 or the XR series?
Go ahead, Carl.
So on the Flow8, the first 2 preamps are much, much higher quality. So these are the same ones found on the wing. So these are much higher quality than the XR18. Channels 3 and 4 would be comparable to the wing. The XR18 and the actually no, they're probably actually a bit higher than the XR18, but on par with quality from the XR18. But the first 2 channels, these are really high quality.
Next question.
Comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. What do you guess the price point would be if Flow8 offered noise assist either per channel or on all the channels?
Go ahead, Carl.
So if this has a FPGA that can do it, we don't know yet because Behringer haven't said if it can. They would probably just add it to the 4 channels. So the 4 mic channels, obviously they probably wouldn't put it on the line channels. So I'd say maximum of 4 channels for this particular one, maybe even 2, just the first 2 channels, depending on the horsepower of the chip, if the chip can do it. Price point, Behringer wouldn't change the price point much, because that's not how they price stuff. That's kind of like the Apple approach. They don't charge that kind of way.
Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore, Malaysia. Which would you rather have, the XR18 or a Flow8?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the XR18 is a bit of a different beast. It's 18 in, 18 out USB. It does have the auto mix feature in it. And again, it's 18 channels, 18 or 16 mic channels, 2 line channels. So it is really a different beast for 3 times the price. If you're doing podcasting with 3 people in the room talking, then the Flow8 would be perfect. If you're mixing a band with analog drums, XR18.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I've been using the XR12 on a show for a long time. It's been super stable, super reliable. Quality's been fantastic. It's flexible, but it is not an audio interface. So that's where, it's not. I wish it had a USB audio out, but you got to go up to, I think, to the XR18 for that feature set. But if you're comparing more Apple-y to Apple-y comparisons, they're closer because of their number of preamps and the price points. So. But the Flow8, if it came out 5 years ago, that's what we would be using on the show, because it's got all the right, checks all the boxes.
Absolutely. Next question.
Idris Haggy is back from Fairfax, Virginia, with how does the Flow8 compare to RME's Babyface Pro FS, and can we have a future demo of any of the RME USB interfaces?
We should. In general, we should try to figure out how we compare it. Like, there's probably a second hour that just should be all of us showing different audio interfaces and talking about them and what we like about them and don't like about them. And I think across our group, we could probably cover almost all of them. So let's think about just general audio interfaces. We spent a lot of time on Flow8, which has been very popular. And we're really glad that Carl's here. It'd be a really short show without him. So anyway, let's go to the next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, are there any caveats when switching from streaming mode to recording mode on the Flow8? There seems to be an interruption in the output when switching between the modes. What's the most likely scenario where I'd be tempted to transition?
Good, Carl.
We're going to do this now, so let's do it live on air. So here we go. I'm going to see my audio interface. I'm going to go into routing, and I'm in streaming at the moment. So when I switch this, it will automatically switch. Yeah, it will work. So I'm just going to continually talk, and while I do, I'm going to hit recording now. So if I've dropped out, just let me know and just tell me. I can't tell how long I've dropped out for, and then I'll go back now. So I'll go back over to streaming. Let's see how and let's see how long it takes for Zoom to switch me over.
Yes, approximately a second.
There we go. But it automatically picks it up, but it's probably about 1 second, which is kind of good.
What I heard though was the sound driver. Now, when you went in recording mode, it was taking a direct out of channel 1 pre-processing, and that's what we were hearing. So we were just hearing the mic completely raw. That was the interesting difference.
Yeah. So that's
because in recording mode, my guess is when I go to recording mode, I have no doubt that my snapshot is for streaming. So I go to recording mode and going to like an empty snapshot.
Yeah,
so that's definitely what you're hearing.
But
well. So it's an empty snapshot.
I was surprised that you could make the transition. I don't see how you would, whatever scenario would be that you'd ever do that in production. Like you would just
if you accidentally did it, you're losing about a second of audio.
Worst case.
And if worst case,
you're not rebooting the computer.
It seems like you're because I think the other thing is it may not just be that it's going to. I mean, if I was recording, I generally would love to be able to hit a button and not have any of the filtering on it because I can always do that later. So that might be also.
You can.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says the Flow8 includes a tap button for timing effects with firmware updates. What might this dedicated button be put to good use for in the future?
Good, Carl.
So the tap button, which let's see if I can bring it up quickly. So there it is there at the top of the screen above the only menu you get is the tiny little screen. It will light solid red. It'll flash for the first 30 seconds, I think, when you turn on the unit, and then it will go solid red. So it does 2 kind of features, but the main one, of course, is to tap in the tempo for delays and stuff like that. But it can actually be used, and there's actually multiple button presses you can do. For instance, you can go into the menu and switch on phantom power for channel 1, channel 2. But another way you can do it is you can hold at the bottom button here, the main button, and you can hold that down, and you can actually slide one of the sliders of 1 and 2 and then press adjust or select. It'll turn on phantom power. So there are shortcuts, and I think that's one of the things they can do with this, and actually add a lot of multi-button shortcuts and a lot of new features.
Next question.
The 7 Scroll folks in Brooklyn, New York are up next with, can the Flow8 integrate into a Dante workflow for remote mixing like the X32 can?
Go ahead, Carl.
So I guess in recording mode, you can send in the 8+2 channels, and then if you've got a other Dante hardware hooked on, you can loop them in via your Dante hardware because it's going to be USB, and you can pump them out via your Dante channels to something else.
Go ahead, next question.
Stan Chan in Roseville, California. Would the UAD Apollo Twin X with Cedar plug-in and an MCU control surface be a better option than the Flow8 for people who need motorized faders and an integrated noise assist?
I think so. I mean, if you need the integrated noise assist, I think that the Apollo Twin is probably, if you're not going to use a sound devices, if you want to have those things, I think that might be the right solution there. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, when connected to the Flow8 via Bluetooth, does the phone's default audio adjustment affect the line out volume into the mixer?
Good, Carl.
So if we're talking about the phone's adjustment on your device, let's say your smartphone, into this, yes, it does. So if you're changing the system audio volume on your device into this, it will change the volume. And that's actually in the manual. There are 4 ways to adjust the volume of Bluetooth input, and that's one of them. You can actually just change the volume on your iPad or your iPhone or other device.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman back again from Pittsburgh. Can you go over the advantages of using the Flow8 when bringing in instruments into the mixer along with vocals in a small band type scenario? So he's looking at routing, effects, compression, and so forth.
Good, Carl.
So yeah, you see here you got the 2 phantom power inputs, you got the 2 combo inputs, which are for dynamic mics or line inputs, but they don't have phantom power. Then underneath that you actually have 4 inputs which are line level. They're stereo linked as far as volume, but they can be separated. And you'll notice that channel 6 and channel 8 are actually instrument inputs. So you can actually plug a guitar, bass guitar, that kind of stuff straight into these. Each of them, the only thing you don't get per channel is a gate and expander. That's one thing I'm hoping they actually added via firmware update. You do have a limiter on the main output, but you don't have it on the on each input coming in. You do have compression on every channel. As I said, gate. So the 5, 6, 7, 8 are stereo linked all the time. But if you plug an instrument in there, it's just going to be a mono in anyway. So you're going to lose channel 5, you lose channel 7 in a way. But yes, I think for a small band, that's where this actually really makes a lot of sense.
Next question.
James Brooks in New York. How does the Flow8 compare to the Tascam Model 12 or 24 series?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the Tascam Model 24 and 20, these are actually very interesting. Again, they actually analog mixers that have an audio interface built in, but they do have a lot of other very cool features built in. One of those big cool features is actually have recording built in. So it actually records all 24 channels or 12 channels or 16 channels, depending on which model you get. So that's actually a really big feature, the fact that they can actually record all the channels. That's something that this doesn't do any recording in the Flow8 at all, but they are analog. They're best of both worlds. So that's kind of what Tascam's done there. They've got the analog compression, analog EQ, analog levels. So it's an analog summing mixer in a way, but it does have per channel recording for all the inputs.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, second to the last one here in the queue right now. I've been slightly interested in the Wing. How is the repairs or parts availability on Behringer's larger mixers? And could you see them releasing a full proper manual?
Go ahead, Nick. Carl.
Yeah, so the Wing is the next level up. If you have any issues with the Wing, Behringer want to know, because it is their top of the line, it's their flagship. So they'll have no problem fixing it under warranty, even if it's a bit out of warranty. Getting parts for it's not going to be a problem because they have a massive factory in China, which makes parts for it. So if you want parts, go to your official Behringer repairer and they'll get the parts in and probably fix it for you as well if it's out of warranty. As far as the Wing, the other part of the Wing, as far as proper manual, it does have a humongous manual. You kind of have to go digging around for it. Essentially, if you don't own one, you have to kind of go finding where it is. They do have a few different manuals, but there is like 160-page manual for it. It does have OSC as well, enormous OSC manual as well.
And next question.
Brian Anderson in Silver Springs, Maryland. Hi, Brian. Does the MIDI implementation include tempo and clock so that the effects can be set without tap tempo?
Go ahead, Carl. Carl.
Yep, there's my mute. So I was thinking about actually bringing up this, but it's just too big of a document to bring in as far as what MIDI can be done in this. But what it can actually do as far as the tap tempo, it can actually do those kind of things as far as FX control. So the FX control, it does have that. You do get control parameters via that. The only thing I think you can't do, because the thing is the tap tempo can be done by a foot switch. It's something we haven't talked about, is there's a foot switch as well, which can be used for either tap tempo, or it can also be used for going between scenes. So you can go between scenes, go forward or backwards between scenes. I believe the tap tempo is only on the unit itself. The reason for that is because MIDI is signals. It's not a time-based thing. So it's just sending commands like now. In essence, you could do note on, note off. You could use it in that way. But at the moment, as far as I know, the foot switch is a remote way of doing that. So they do have a remote way of doing it. It's a foot switch.
That was a lot of answers.
Wow.
That's a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
Did we set a record today? I wonder how many we have.
We did set a record. So this one got merged from yesterday, so it looks higher for the panelists in the background. It looks higher than it actually was, but I believe
it was 58 when we started. It was 58 questions when we started.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so I think we're at 71 questions for the 2 hours, which is I think a new record. So yeah. Josh has the International Flow8 Awareness Day. So anyway, the Carl, I want to thank all the panelists, but I want to thank Carl for coming. I knew that we had, it was just, and what's great about this is having a non-vendor walk through it. So this is something that I want to try to do more of. When we have someone who's really an expert in a specific piece of hardware, having, we have some experts obviously that we're really glad to see you, George, by the way, coming in on the audio day. And we have a lot of experts here that can bring a lot of that knowledge in. But having someone who really is deep in it, who doesn't work for the company, isn't getting something, and can just tell us the way it is super valuable. So I want to try to find more times we can do that. It's really
I was
good.
really impressed. I mean, I would say arguably better than any rep, I think.
Oh yeah.
Could have done. Honestly.
Yeah.
Because a rep will know what they need to know to teach people, but Carl,
they're not using it every day.
He has real world experience and really dug in and just new answers to things that I would RTFM, man. I don't know.
PR
that's past it. Yeah. So and that's this is a real example of the kind of thing we're trying to do a second hour, is just really dig into those things deeply. I think we're going to have a similar experience. I mean, I think the next 2 days will be good. Doing the ruthless reviews is always fun, for Wednesday. And I think that Thursday, talking about like how to get into the business and how to get into any business or whatever, I think is gonna be really useful. I think another Geek Fest will be the Isadora one. We've got a lot of really heavy duty users that are gonna, I think, join us for Friday. So it's another big one. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Thanks again to our panelists for coming every day. Turns out, everybody's got a bunch of great answers. Thanks to our producers who asked 70 questions. so it's your show and you did a great job. So thank you so much. And so now we'll see you tomorrow talking about, we'll do ruthless reviews. Just a warning to all of our panelists that you will be picked out. But otherwise we'll see you all in after hours. Thanks.